time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chad Erickson. Good to have you with us on this Wednesday edition of the show. A lot of news to get to from the NBA after a busy Tuesday night. Joel Embiid returns, but for how long? Warriors played a good one against the Mavericks. Coaching news to get to. Something to consider. Consider the ratings bonanza for the women's NCAA tournament. And there could be big changes coming to that tournament. Odds and ends, we'll get into the golf, stadium wars, and all of that stuff. But we start things out today. Oh, Jane McManus stops by the show, too. Can't forget that. Former ESPN alum. She's got a book coming out next year about women's investment or business investment in women's sports. And we're going to talk about the whole women's sports landscape with her coming up as well. But we start things out in the NFL. Blockbuster trade. Beep, 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 beep. Sam Yarnell, Bills fan number one. Numero uno. Stephon Diggs on the move to the Houston Texans. Wow. A whole bunch of draft picks moving around in that, and Buffalo will get some of those, including a second-round pick in 2024. One, are you surprised? And two, what does this say about the direction of the Buffalo Bills organization?
Jason, it's great to be with you on this Wednesday, as it always is.
Wacky Wednesday.
This is a shocker. My jaw was on the floor when I was eating my Cheerios this morning, and all of a sudden Adam Schefter was tweeting that the Bills were trading Stephon Diggs. I spit them all out at the same time. It was really a sight to be seen. It took a while to clean up. This is a shocker. I can't believe the Bills finally did it. I can't say that I'm surprised. You gotta... The type of receiver that Stephon Diggs is, the receiver who always needs the ball and has to be the wide receiver one, when you have a year like he did in 2023, this was always a possibility in my mind. And when you looked at the Bills' cap situation, this was always a possibility. Now let's talk about the other aspect of it for a second. This makes the Houston Texans a sight to be seen in the AFC. Now you've got a veteran to come in and teach Tank Dell the ropes in his second year, a guy who was outstanding in his first year, a guy to come in and make CJ Stroud better. That offense is so high-powered now, Jason. Do we see anyone else winning the AFC South?
No. And as much as you know, it's a simple answer. As much as you know, I love Jacksonville and what they had started to build. They regressed last year. Trevor Lawrence regressed, I feel like, late in the year. I know he was dealing with some injury issues, but that team, I don't think has the firepower. Obviously, offensively, we know they were challenged last year. And Houston is just a juggernaut. And here's what we got to say, too. I just love that the Texans, hot on the heels of last year, seeing what they have in a generational quarterback like a CJ Stroud, said, you know what, we're going for it. We're going to improve this team to the degree they have. I mean, you add Joe Mixon in this offseason now. When you start to talk about this roster and the way they're improving things, I mean, you got an offense now with C.J. Stroud, Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. He's got no... And here's the other thing about a Stephon Diggs. He's going to make those receivers better, not just by the showing the ropes part. It's the attention that you're going to have to give to him that's going to allow these other receivers and open some things up for an offense that was already extremely dynamic last year. Led by C.J. Stroud. And now the next question is, though, if we're talking about it from the Houston perspective, because I want to get back to Buffalo.
We will.
But talking about this from the Houston perspective here for a second, the development of C.J. Stroud, beyond being this young gunslinger who was, hey, I just go out there and make throws. I play fast and loose. His development beyond that, into becoming more of a, and I don't want to say, you don't ever want to put people in boxes and say he's got to become, just your typical pocket passing quarterback. No, but it is evolution and growth. And we do see a lot of times quarterbacks that regress in their second year. There are adjustments to be made playing with a star receiver like a Stephon Diggs, and we have to consider that aspect of this story as well.
We do. CJ Stroud, I think, though, and this is me interjecting my own opinion into this, he just seems like that type of quarterback that's almost Josh Allen-esque or Patrick Mahomes-esque, where they're well-rounded enough that they can kind of avoid that second-year regression and actually notice a huge leap that they take in their second year. I wouldn't be surprised if CJ Stroud this coming year is even better than he was last year, because you're adding so much, like we've been saying, Jason, you're adding so much into that offense. It's way too much for defensive coordinators to worry about. I will say, though, on the topic of regression, and this will go back to the Bills thing.
Okay.
I think that the Bills made the smart move. I think that they sold before the value bottomed out on a wide receiver who had career lows in just about every statistical category last year. I shouldn't say career lows. The lowest in Buffalo that he had in every statistical category. You're looking at yards per reception, receiving yards, touchdowns, all of it. Receiving yards per game, obviously. It was all the lowest it had been since 2018, 2019, which is exactly when Minnesota traded him. This is the cycle of Stephon Diggs. He comes into a new place. He shows out. I don't know whether it's fatigue, but something clearly happens to him about year 3, year 4 with that team when he's really cemented himself as a star and he starts to regress. We saw it in Minnesota. We saw it in Buffalo. And now Houston just bought in on a going on 31-year-old wide receiver.
Going for it now. They're going for it now.
They are. They're buying in on a wide receiver who they need to win a Super Bowl with in kind of sort of the next 2 years.
Yes.
I think it was smart for the Bills because they got a second round pick that they can use with as a team that already has more draft capital than almost anyone in the draft. I think they have something like 13 picks, or had, I should say, before this trade. Now they've got the capital to move up into the higher first round, take a wide receiver who you can build your franchise around in a stacked wide receiver draft. That's one reason I actually kind of like this move.
Yeah, I think in the short term, there are going to be some Bills fans who are a little upset and worry about the direction of the organization coming off of a deal like this. But I would tend to agree with you. You're building for the long term with Josh Allen. He's not going anywhere. And while there might be a short step backwards in terms of this offseason, I think in the big picture, I would agree with you. I think it is a good long-term move. Real quick.
The Bills went from a bottom 5 to a top 5 team in terms of cap space with this move also.
We're coming back. Jane McManus joins us on the other side.
Over 13 million Americans were affected by identity theft in 2022, and the threats go way beyond just credit card fraud. Today's identity thieves can use your information in ways that are easy to miss by just monitoring accounts and credit, like opening loans, transferring home titles, even committing crimes.
Someone got my social security number, made a driver's license, and it was used for criminal activity.
You can do so much with a social security number that I didn't know could happen. They drained my bank account. It was terrifying.
You're even more vulnerable than you realize. Your information is exposed through online shopping, banking, even corporate data breaches. No wonder there's a new victim of identity theft every 3 seconds. Only LifeLock alerts you to the widest volume of threats all in one place, like someone trying to use your social security number, open a new loan in your name, or even commit a crime in your name.
There was a big yes button and there was a big no button. I clicked, "That's not me," and LifeLock took it from there.
If you become a victim of identity theft, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will be assigned to your case and work to fix the issue on your behalf.
If something happens, you have somebody fighting for you.
All LifeLock members are backed by the LifeLock $1 Million Protection Package, including reimbursement for stolen funds, personal expenses, and coverage for lawyers and experts up to $1 million. It can be dangerously easy to steal your identity. With LifeLock, it's easy to help protect yourself.
I will be with LifeLock forever.
Join the millions of people already protected by LifeLock. And for a limited time, save 25% on your first year with promo code 25TV. All plans include a 60-day money-back guarantee.
Call 800-710-7531.
Or visit lifelock.com/25TV to save 25% on your first year of identity theft protection. Enroll now.
stop whitening your smile the old-fashioned way. I'm Jonathan Greenhut, the CEO of PowerSwabs. If you have yellowing between your teeth, if you have coffee or tea stains near your gum line, just snap, swab, and smile. And in each application, you'll see whiter teeth. PowerSwabs was clinically studied to whiten natural teeth as well as stained caps, crowns, and veneers. Receive up to 50% off and get a free PowerSwabs Quick Stick pen with your order. Dial the number on your screen or visit powerswabs.com today.
Sports Wrap continues on this Wednesday. Good to have you with us. Sam Yarnell will rejoin us in a little bit. Something to consider still right around the corner. Yankees lost their first game last night, too. For anybody who's been listening to the show throughout the NCAA women's basketball tournament, we've talked about it a lot. And I think everybody's talking about it a lot, as the ratings would indicate. And the story came out on Tuesday afternoon. 12.9 million people watching LSU against Iowa. Not just the highest rated women's college basketball game in the history of ESPN, but the highest rated college basketball game, period, ever for ESPN. Is it a watershed moment? Is this the real turning point now in the way we cover and document and give credibility to women's sports, both collegiately and professionally? I wanted to bring in an old friend, Jane McManus, who does a terrific job. She's an ESPN alum, we like to say. She's also an author and one of the most talented people I know. And she has a book coming out early next year called Fast Track, which talks about investment in the women's sports world. And Jane, I sort of wanted to start with kind of the present and work our way sort of around that. When you see a headline like that, I knew it was going to be a big number, and I said it on Monday on the show. I said, this is going to do a record number. There was no question in my mind. The buildup leading to this moment told me that this was coming. But were you yourself surprised when you saw that number?
I have to say I wasn't. And I actually, you and I do a little social media every once in a while. And I, tweeted something to that effect on Monday, which is like, when you see the rating for this, here are some things to keep in mind, because I knew it was going to be a blockbuster rating. Last year you had, for the women's championship game between the same two teams, LSU and Iowa, that was the start, the undercard, I guess, on Monday, you had 9.9 million who viewed that in some capacity. And that was a paradigm shifting number. So, you look at that and you think about how that then shifts everything forward. It raised the ceiling for what is possible with ratings around women's sports. In the past, there have been two ways to measure sports and how successful they are. Ratings has been and attendance. And those have always been things that women's sports have struggled with. But I think we have seen it just in the last 12 months, but certainly the last 24, again, the doors have been blown off expectations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And even the UConn game after, which was, we were watching out here on the West Coast, was a terrific basketball game as well. And it's so funny looking at this women's tournament, not to get too into the weeds on the actual tournament itself and the overarching conversation about women's sports in general. But it's so funny to watch UConn, who has been the thing in women's college basketball for so long, and they're sort of like the underlying story. They're kind of down a little deeper into the story when you think about who's left in this women's tournament, and what they've done is amazing considering all the injuries they've suffered and things like that. It's kind of funny that Gino's team is actually flying under the radar in all this.
It's crazy, but it's great to see Paige Beckers come out and be able to do what she's done after her injury.
Yeah.
When I was on ESPN and doing radio and TV around when we were able to talk about women's sports, which was, again, we had to pick our spots. Yeah. It wasn't like we could do it all the time. But I remember the conversation was like, 90% of the women's college basketball topic headlines were, is UConn bad for women's basketball? Because they were so dominant. And, particularly after kind of Tennessee, wasn't as big in the rivalry space between those two. And that was the perennial conversation, which again was just so, it was like, oh, we've got to talk about this again. But it is interesting to see UConn now and, back in the Final Four, where they've been a million times, but not as the favorite. I mean, and certainly not a walkover. And yeah, I mean, it is good for women's basketball, and there's certainly more parity now. But but then you also have a program like UConn that's been investing in the women's space and giving. You have Hartford, the Greater Hartford area, and the Hartford Current, and the media in that area, which has covered UConn women in the same way they've covered UConn men for the most part. So, I mean, there are a lot of factors there other than just one team was better than all the others. It was also there was a lot of investment around that team.
Yeah. I asked this question yesterday. I was talking about this with my husband, and I said, how much of this, though, and this buildup is because we're creating rivalries and stories and Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese and the Kim Mulkey stuff, and we're creating these storylines, kind of WWE style storylines about villains and heels and baby faces and all of this stuff. How much of this is because of that versus what it should be about, which is the amazing athleticism and what we've seen on display just from a playing standpoint?
Well, I think it's both. I really do. I mean, I think it's almost like the sports media has finally caught up to the popularity of women's basketball. It has not been driving it. What has driven, I think, the popularity is social media. Athletes themselves and their social media platforms, and fans finding athletes that way, and then that making the popularity of the sport undeniable for editors and for broadcasters. So it's kind of, the advent of social media allowed the tail to wag the dog a little bit with this. I think now you do find there are a lot of issues, I think, around the coverage of women's sports. Access is a big one, like there needs to be access around women's sports so the storytelling can be done. I think you see the benefits of that with this tournament and the way we kind of know who these players are. I also have to say, like, just from a personal standpoint, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, after last year and all of that, that could have easily gotten something that was genuinely people could have gotten up in arms about. Those two players kept it from being that because they respect each other as competitors and were so vocal about it, which, again, I'm just like, they're like, sorry, don't hang that on us. So I really liked, the way that developed as well. So, the thing is like that young people today, and certainly at the ages of college players now, they are so much savvier about their own narratives, about their own storylines, about the way they're viewed and presented. They're having to do it now through name, image, and likeness stuff where they can get these. I mean, I saw Caitlin Clark, 3 national ads. Like she had State Farm, she had all these different advertisements. Like, they're in the, so you'd watch her play on court and then you'd watch, 2 or 3 national commercials with her in it. That's, huge.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We're talking with Jane McManus. She's got a book coming out in 2025 called Fast Track about investment in the women's sports world. We're going to hang on to her for one more segment. Come back, do more on the other side. Don't go anywhere. We keep the conversation moving on this Wednesday edition of the show. And we keep that conversation moving with our friend Jane McManus. Are you teaching too?
I will be teaching this summer. I'm teaching for adjuncting a class with Michigan State University that's going to be for the entire month of June. Half of it is in Paris and half is in Rome, and it's about sports abroad and how we visit places like Agence France Presse and how they cover sports, L'Equipe, and then go to the Coliseum and talk about the sports and politics and sports and the way that sports have been used.
Yeah, I could spend an hour. I could spend a whole hour with you just talking about the coverage of sports and how we teach it and how we do this, and because it brings to mind the Shohei Ohtani stuff and how the Japan sports media is probably covering this story versus how we're covering it here. There's so many different directions I can go with somebody like you, which is why I always enjoy being able to converse with you. Where do we go from here when this women's tournament is over and the dust settles? Because then, all right, women's college basketball is over. Yes, WNBA will be here. Does this catapult the WNBA when you're going to have a Caitlin Clark entering the league, maybe an Angel Reese entering the league, and it feels like the pipeline of star power is starting to build now? A Juju Watkins who will be there in a couple of years, a Paige Beckers that's going to be there. Where do we go when this tournament ends to keep the positive momentum moving forward?
It's real difficult to, even though women's basketball at the college level is a pipeline to the WNBA, those two entities really function very differently in terms of the investment, the broadcasting, the storytelling around all of that. And they each have kind of unique considerations. For example, the WNBA has a union, so they are collectively bargaining the things that they are doing and the access that they have, et cetera. But I think both are in, a terrific growth mode. The ratings are there right now for women's college basketball in a way that they haven't been for the WNBA, except in the first 2 years of the WNBA, where ratings were really high. Those games were on ABC. I think a lot of people kind of memory hole that 1997, 98. But that was a time of real growth and investment in women's sports that dissipated. So, I think that's kind of also something to keep in mind when we look at this, is that the gains that are made, they don't stay forever. They have to be cultivated. So I think that what you're looking at then when you look at the next couple of years for women's basketball is, how does the WNBA take advantage of what is happening right now in the college space? And I think they have to do that by growing their own fan bases, getting the most out of their own broadcast deals.
Does the season need to be longer so that so that they can bring in more revenue, pay the women what they deserve, and they don't have to go play overseas and wind up like a Brittany Griner who becomes a cautionary tale for having to play overseas in these other countries that have different laws and different rules and different ways of operating politically? I mean, to me, that would feel like a logical step, is start gradually increasing the number of games for the WNBA. Is it feasible?
I think that there are ways that the WNBA is trying to do that right now, which is they're expanding. They're taking different bids for expansion, and they're looking at ways that they can do that. Expansion, more games. And if you have more games, then you can sell those games to advertisers, you can sell them to broadcasters, you increase the amount of money that you're looking at when you get these broadcast packages and rights deals. So they are trying to look at creative ways of kind of upping the profile and upping the product and making it a larger product that they can parse out and sell. What
would be the next sport? Would it be the women's soccer that sort of gets the next big round of investment? I know we've got women's hockey now professionally, and that seems to sort of be building. And do you get a sense, we were talking about pipeline of talent in something like basketball, do you sense there is a pipeline of money now that is starting to line up behind women's sports that will continue to help grow the sport?
Well, that's been, I think, what's really revolutionized the space is the money that's coming in now. You have Ally, which is a bank that made a commitment to put half of its advertising dollars in women's sports and half in men's. And in the first year since it's done that, I think it got to like 35% for women because it was so difficult to find ways to invest. And they've been real creative about the things that they've looked at. And also, I think they've gotten a lot of really good publicity as a result of that. That's probably, paid for that investment twice over, although they say that's not the reason that they're doing it. They're doing it because they genuinely are coming from a place of equity. The other thing that's made a huge difference is that you have entities like Wasserman Group and Sports Innovation Labs that are actually putting together data on what is the market for women's sports. And this is something that hasn't really been addressed. Like total addressable market for women's sports. Like what is even the potential fan base here? What are we looking at in terms of potential numbers? No one could give that to you, 5 years ago because no one was looking at that. Now you have people who are saying, who are the fans of women's sports? Are they men? Are they women? What do they like to buy? How do they watch? How are they consuming these sports? How do we meet those fans where they are? To me, like that is the biggest difference, as opposed to just saying 1-to-1, we need to bring the men's fans over to the women's game. It's like, what is the difference here between these markets?
Jane, is sports betting driving some of this?
For sure. I mean, absolutely. You can bet on anything. And if you can, you can bet on women's sports just as easily as men's.
Yeah.
And so, there are betting partnerships there for those professional leagues, just as there would be for men's leagues. And that's a huge, as you know, influx of money, not only for these leagues, but then also for the coverage. Like, there are a lot of media entities now. Content is taking a huge, investment from those sports betting sites and incorporating it into coverage. And that makes a huge difference.
Jane McManus, she's got a book coming out early next year called Fast Track, and I'm looking forward to having an opportunity to talk about it when it does come out. And I always appreciate having your insights when it comes to just anything sports related. But I saw you tweeting about some things. I said, I got to get her on the show to talk about this. So the timing was perfect. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you down the line.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk to you too.
All right, Sammy Arnell joins us coming up in a couple of minutes. We'll get into some NBA news and notes. Joel Embiid made his return to the court last night. Warriors got a big win over the Mavericks. And coaching news. Season isn't even over yet. We got our first coaching change in the offing. Who's going to coach the Hornets long term? It's not going to be Steve Clifford. We're coming back. More to do on this Wednesday edition of Sports Wrap.
Stop whitening your smile the old-fashioned way. I'm Jonathan Greenhut, the CEO of Paraswabs. If you have yellowing between your teeth, if you have coffee or tea stains near your gum line, just snap, swab, and smile. And in each application, you'll see whiter teeth. Paraswabs was clinically studied to whiten natural teeth as well as stained caps, crowns, and veneers. Receive up to 50% off and get a free Paraswabs Quick Stick pen with your order. Dial the number on your screen or visit Paraswabs.com today.
Good to have you with us on this Wednesday edition of the show. Thanks to Jane McManus for dropping by the program and always making us smarter for it. We'll get back to the women's hoops conversation because I want to see what Sam thinks of the monster number that the NCAA Elite Eight women's tournament action did. Also, some potential changes coming to the NCAA women's basketball tournament. Long overdue changes, if I say so myself. But Sam, let's talk a little NBA. Joel Embiid, the Warriors, some news involving a head coach on his way out. We were talking, we'll get into it. Let me start with Joel Embiid returning last night, 24 in a win for the Sixers, who have just been kind of flying under the radar since he went down in January. And everybody was wondering, when would he come back? What impact would he have? How much time would you get with him in the remainder of the regular season? And I think they timed this perfect, by the way. You basically give him a 7-game preseason here, so to speak, to get him ready for the playoffs. And then you go balls to the wall with Joel Embiid and this team, through the rest of the playoffs, and you just see what you can do. However, you have to wonder if just every time he's out on the floor, you're going to be holding your breath, worried about every time he falls, every time he goes down. Is he going to come up hobbling? And when you look at the Sixers from a betting standpoint, because of that, I think they're tough to bet.
Yeah, you can't touch the Philadelphia 76ers. What are we talking about? They are the most volatile thing in the NBA right now. That'd be like betting the Warriors to make the playoffs, Jason.
We'll get to that. Philadelphia, by the way, plus 3,100 to win the title.
Yeah, and I think there's good reason. That number even feels a little short to me. They had a good win last night in Joel's first game back, but Chet Holmgren still looked good against him. Chet still went for 20-something. The Thunder didn't even have Shea. They didn't have Jalen Williams. I mean, really? Like, this was honestly, this game last night kind of sold me against the Sixers more than it sold me on the Sixers, because they get Joel back. They're supposed to be this, force to be reckoned with. And then against a competitive team in the West without two of their starters, they're probably their best player and their fourth best player, you have a 3-4 point win. It's tough. It's tough to justify that and then say, oh yeah, I'm going to expect these Philadelphia 76ers, who have historically not dealt well with Joel Embiid injury-wise heading into the postseason, I'm going to trust them now more than ever to go on a deep run. I just can't get behind that, Jason.
The Warriors get 13 on 5 of 18 shooting from Stephen Curry last night. And still if you had told me they would beat the Mavericks with Curry having that stat line, I would have had you urinating into a cup, because I would have said we got to drug test you. That's an impressive win for the Warriors last night, one they desperately needed. I think they're like plus 235 to make the playoffs, to get out of the play-in right now and actually make the playoffs. And I got to say, I'm still behind. If you force me, if you gave me Sam Yarnell money and said you got to put it on something, I think they find a way into the playoffs.
There's a good reason you're never getting Sam Yarnell money, because you do things like that with it.
Come on.
No, this team's not getting into the playoffs. They had 27 combined from the Splash Brothers last night. I mean, when's the last time that the Warriors had 27 combined from Steph and Clay?
Wiggins showed up
and won a game. I think this game spoke more to me about the Luka MVP talk that we've kind of heard. I mean, he has 30, 12, and 11, a 30-piece triple-double, and his team still can't win. When you talk about, listen, the numbers will show you that Luka Doncic is not going to win the MVP, but that number has shortened a lot in the last month or so. I think that last night was kind of his opportunity to be like, yeah, I'm the MVP, go for 40, get his team a win. And he wasn't able to do it. So I think that award is Jokic's now.
Minus 2,000 on Jokic and plus 850 on Doncic right now.
Yeah, so that got $1 better in that game alone. Interesting. On the Warriors side, this is, again, just not a team. You're relying on 12 points off the bench from Moses Moody. Are we really convinced that this team is going to make any sort of run?
I'm not saying any sort of run, but I still think they find a way to get out of the play-in. But you know what here's the sad reality, and this is the final thought I want to give on this, and then we got to get to Steve Clifford. This is what the end of dynasties look like, right? Last year it was, could they make a run in the playoffs? We knew they'd get in, but could they make a run in the playoffs? The next year it's, all right, can they make the playoffs? And next year it's, can they make the play-in? It's that gradual decline because organizations refuse to cut bait too early instead of cutting bait too late. And this is what you wind up with. Steve Clifford reportedly out at the end of this season. He's going to coach the final 7 games of the regular season for the Hornets, because what are you going to do with an interim coach in a week or 2 weeks, however long it takes to play 7 games? But Steve Clifford reportedly going to move into the front office. And we talked yesterday. I don't know if we talked on air or off air. There's going to be a lot of coaches up for NBA gigs. You know, a name I heard somebody mention yesterday was Jay Wright potentially getting into the NBA, which would be kind of interesting. If Dan Hurley wins another title, is Dan Hurley a guy that's potentially out there? I saw Shams Charania saying yesterday he isn't really hearing Dan Hurley's name, but he knows teams are going to ask. You got to ask and see if a guy's happy, if he wants to stay at UConn, try and get more money out of them, or if he moves on. It's going to be a fascinating NBA offseason when it comes to coaching.
Jason, let's get Jay Wright in the league. We need more Hofstra representation.
I love Jay Wright. I have no problem with Jay Wright at all. We're coming back. Something to consider. Women's NCAA hoops next.
What's up, guys? What I'm about to show you is going to change the way you shave your head forever.
You can shave your head in 90 seconds or less.
With no cuts or nicks. It's 100% waterproof.
It even works in the shower.
Introducing Remington's Balder Boss. With increased flex and 5 dual-track floating head design, get over 60% more head coverage for a faster, closer shave and skin-close results.
No nicks, no scrapes. Fit in the palm of my hand, and the results were amazing.
Shave in the shower or with any foam or gel. With Japanese-grade steel blades, plow through the thickest of hair. Anytime, anywhere. There's even a pop-up trimmer to complete your perfect groom. Now, you can try the Remington Balder Boss in your home for 30 days for just $14.99. Complete with a 5-year limited warranty and 100% satisfaction guarantee. You can also get our ear, nose, and brow trimmer free. Just pay separate processing and handling.
Give it a try. You won't be disappointed.
Order your Balder Boss now.
The one and only Sports Wrap continues. Odds and ends around the corner, including some odds you can use on the PGA Tour. The lead up to the Masters final tournament this week. We'll get into that. We should have had you give odds on the Sam. We should have had you give odds on Live Golf this week in Miami. We should have had you do that too. See? I could have really put you to work.
I can't handicap the Live, Jason. It's a different game.
It is a different game. I would agree. Also, we'll get into some stadium wars and some interesting things going on with Kansas City and the Chiefs and the Royals as well. Also, an Oakland A's update in terms of where they're going to be playing their baseball over the next several years. But something to consider, Sam Yarnell. Consider this. 12.3 million people watched Iowa and LSU in the Elite Eight, not even in a championship game. It was the highest rated ESPN college basketball game, not women's, ever. It eclipsed anything that network has ever done. And think about all the college basketball that's been on that network. 12.3 million people. I don't know what the peak number was. It was probably higher than that. But 12.3 million people watched Caitlin Clark in Iowa beat Angel Reese, Kim Mulkey, and the, or as Wolf Blitzer called her, Kim Mulvey. Like, come on, man. If you don't know what you're talking about, just stick to the Beltway in politics.
Whoa. Why are we coming at the Beltway? Beltway?
Just saying. You love the Beltway so much you moved to New Jersey. I don't want to hear it from you.
Listen.
I mean, come on. I mean, let's calm down.
Let's not dock Studio S2's location here, Jason.
So, yeah, it's not even like you moved to New York. You chose Jersey, which is like the armpit. Anyway, we love you, Jersey. I'm just kidding. So, boy, this thing went sideways in a hurry, didn't it? 12.3 million viewers. I think UConn and Iowa could do a comparable number in the Final Four, especially when you consider that ABC jumps in on the coverage. A ratings prediction on UConn and Iowa, Sam Yarnell?
Ooh, put me on the spot.
With Paigey Buckets and Caitlin Clark?
Can I get some 10-5s out there? I could see a 10-5.
I think between all platforms, being ESPN and ABC, I think it could wind up doing more. I think it could. Yeah, I do.
Well,
and go look at and here's the thing. And it's not just that. Go look at ticket demand right now for the women's Final Four. Before these matchups were conceived, prices were higher than anything they've ever seen for a women's Final Four. So
this is how great the state of women's basketball is
really
right now.
Is.
We've spent now
injected into my veins. I love it.
I think this is our third segment this week on women's basketball, and we're halfway through it. And not once have we mentioned the team that has been undefeated for 2 years and is looking to win their their third national championship in a row because they haven't lost a game all season. That's how great women's basketball is right now. We just saw the most watched women's college basketball game in history. It was the most watched college game on ESPN, like Jason said, but any network, it was the most watched women's college basketball game in history. And it didn't include this team on a historic run to beat historic runs. This is cinema. Yeah. This is excellence. Credit to women's basketball for what they've done.
If Tony Reale were here and this were Around the Horn, we would be giving you like massive points right now. Very, very well said. When it comes to, what all this means and the fact that we haven't even talked about South Carolina, who is not lost in like forever. I think that's a very, very good point. Big changes potentially coming, though, to the women's tournament. And it's good to see the powers that be when it comes to the NCAA on the women's side of the game, recognizing we can no longer have this model of opening round games in the first couple of rounds, round of 64, round of 32, where you're playing essentially home games for a lot of the top seeds. Go to a neutral site. The game is big enough now. You can go and play at a neutral site. If LSU is playing against Middle Tennessee State at a neutral site, the outcome of that game may have wound up being different. But instead, it's essentially a home game for LSU against Middle Tennessee State. They've got the crowd behind them. They gain some momentum. They go on and win the game. I think it's a big deal, and I think it's high time that the NCAA made this change.
I completely agree with you, Jason. I mean, we don't even see the first 4 games on the men's side played on neutral sites. We see them all the way through the second round play on home sites in the women's game. I think that kind of speaks to the lack of equity between sports across the board, but it's a small thing that could lead to a big change, and I think that you'd see a lot of really cool results, like you mentioned, the Middle Tennessee State. But think about all of the Cinderellas that we have in the men's game. It all starts in a city far away from where that team's located, and it's usually because that niche team brought a few more fans than the powerhouse who was expecting to go to the second round, which is going to be closer to campus. I love this proposition, and I think that it would be the best move for women's basketball right now.
Yeah, and I think they're going to get smart to it. Also be interesting to see how, and we talked about this a little bit with Jane, how the WNBA capitalizes on this pipeline of talent coming out of the collegiate ranks. And it's set up now that you're going to be getting, boom, 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 boom for the next several years. You're going to be talking about talent. I mean, you got Shaquille O'Neal's daughter who's entering the collegiate ranks now. You've got Juju Watkins at USC. There is a pipeline set up. No excuses for the WNBA. We're coming back. All right, sports wrap. Getting set to wrap things up. Put a bow on this baby for a Wednesday. If you miss anything from the show, make sure to go and check out the vodcast version of the show. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, you name it. We're there. I think we're on Amazon, too. You're looking at the podcast section there on Amazon. Without any further delay, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Sam Yarnell. PGA Tour this week. Final event leading up to the Masters, obviously, next week. So we're all looking forward to that. The Valero Texas Open.
The warm-up.
Jason. Yeah.
The event week before the best week in golf.
The event you never want to win, because if you do, you will never win the Masters.
Well, so there's something to be said about that. We'll get into that in a little bit of my analysis.
Who do you like?
All right. First guy I like. we're going with a little bit of chalk off the top. Ludwig Aberg. Why?
Ludwig.
This is a kid who went to Texas Tech. This is a kid who has played this TPC course many a time. He's got great familiarity with it, and he's been red hot lately. So ride the hot hand a little bit, but also we like the course familiarity, and we like the 12-1 price. I also like the plus 160 for the top 10. And hey, if you're really feeling like laying juice, minus 125 for a top 20 with our friends at FanDuel is not a bad price. I don't mind laying the juice for Ludwig Aberg to finish top 20 this weekend. My second play, Christian Bezuidenhout. Now, this is my long shot. This is my dart throw. Another guy who's been hot lately. I think that he's very motivated to do well in this tournament. Why? Okay. He's just outside of the world golf rankings to get into the Masters right now. With a good performance this week, he could cement himself in that field. That motivation to me, along with the red hot South African with a really cool name, why not? Take my money, FanDuel. Christian Bezuidenhout, 50-1. Love to play him at plus 450 for a top 10. Love him even more. Maybe my best bet, maybe him finish top 20, 2-1. Love the price, love the spot. Bezuidenhout to the moon this week. My final play, Hideki Matsuyama. Almost to the exact contrarian point to what you were just saying, Jason. Matsuyama historically has used this event to warm up for the Masters. You look at last year where he finished 15th in this event and then went on to perform at the Masters. This is a guy who has also been hot. This is kind of my trend in the golf cart this week. I'm finding the misprices on the guys who've been playing good golf lately, and I think Hideki Matsuyama, in this spot where we know that Hideki likes to warm up for Augusta down in Valero at TPC, I think that he will perform well. Play him outright to win at 22-1. Like him at 250, at plus 250 in the top 10. Love him at plus 120 in the top 20. Those are my three guys, Jason.
I'll give you one. Jordan Spieth top 5. Jordan Spieth to win. Jordan Spieth in his home state. Always performs well. Give me Jordan Spieth at 450 for top 5, and give me Jordan Spieth to win at 20-1. That would be my lone pick as far as the Valero Open is concerned. All right, news from the world of stadiums, and it's not good news for Kansas City. I mean, my God, take care of your boys. I'm kidding. We always ask taxpayers to put in money. I think it was like 3/8 of a cent, like 3.5 cents or some crazy number that was on a ballot measure to improve Kauffman Stadium, or I think you get a whole new Kauffman Stadium, and to improve Arrowhead Stadium where the Chiefs play. Royals and Chiefs, both on the losing end of that vote. They're going to have to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out a solution. The Royals have said, we're done with Kauffman Stadium after, I think, 2030 or 2031. And they want a solution now. They want to build, they talked about building a ballpark downtown, putting these new districts together. It's what a lot of these teams are doing now. It's about building a district, building an area, and taking not just a ballpark, but shopping, apartments, things like that. Didn't the Nationals do something similar to that, Sam?
So this is an interesting development. What the Nationals did, first of all, is a little bit different. The Nationals actually put their park right in the middle of kind of nothing in the southeast quadrant of DC, and everything just grew around it. It was like a build it and they will come situation. This Kansas City thing is a little more interesting, right? We all know Kauffman and Arrowhead stadiums, they share a parking lot.
Yep.
So those early season games for the Chiefs, those late season games for the Royals, back when the Royals were making playoff runs, they would get pretty crowded. It would be pretty hectic on a Sunday to get in and out of that facility. The new proposed plan was for them to move, the Royals to move across down to the Power and Light District, build a whole new thing there, like Jason was saying, and the Chiefs would have been able to keep the whole property of Arrowhead Stadium. I felt like, just talking to people in Kansas City and my family members who live in the great state of Missouri, it felt like that was something that a lot of people were proponents of. It felt like that was kind of a win-win situation for a lot of parties. I'm very surprised they're going away from it, Jason.
Throw into the mix, by the way, move away from Kansas City, the A's trying to figure out a way to stay in Oakland till 2027 so they could avoid having to move to Sacramento. Those talks are ongoing between the A's and the city. We'll keep you posted on that. It's going to do it for us today. Thanks to Jane McManus for stopping by the show. Sammy Arnell, we'll see you back here on Thursday for another edition of Sports Wrap. The same with you. We'll see you all back here on Thursday.